Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome you to this edition of the PBS Townhall. My name is Justin Jordan, I'm the chairman of the PBS Committee. To my right is Miguel Ortiz, he's one of our PBS experts. To my left is Zan Stedman, he's my vice chairman. In the booth today we've got my other vice chairman, Leroy Abston, as well as Greg Hudson, our communications chair. I'd like to take a minute to thank all of our expert PBS experts who volunteer their time to help answer questions. They do this on their own time and they answer all the darts and emails that come in. They are Nick Kaplan, Renee Madsen, Brian Manier, Steve Prey, and Marcel Vandermolen. Again, we appreciate all their help. The purpose of the town hall today is to give a good overview of PBS logic and general concepts that would apply to a majority of the pilots. We won't get into specifics on specific pilot bids. We'll change the questions where we think it'll capture a larger audience. If you want to submit questions, the contact information should be on the screen. Should have an email if you have that available, or you can text your questions in and we'll do our best to get to them. We're going to start the presentation with a couple of hot topics we see come in over the last couple of months through the DART system or other communications. I want to start by talking about the trip mix and the way Spirit is constantly changing the type of flying we do. We know right now we're parking some airplanes due to the NEO issues, and that's causing marketing to have to make several changes to the flights. That's adding destinations, pulling out of destinations, changing the timing of the flights and the turn time of the aircraft. All that to say, if you had a good bid the last several months or even years that you've been riding and not changing, I highly recommend you go in and evaluate your bid every month to the pairings that are available. A good bid that worked 3 months ago may or may not give you good results this month. So please always go in every month and check your bid versus the type of flying that's available. We'll go ahead and go to Zan now, and he'll give us some information on the info pages.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit more in depth on the info page than we did at the last town hall. We did a little bit of an overview there, but there's a couple key things here we want to focus in on to bring to your attention. Things that you should be looking at every month when you log in, or things that you should be focusing on at certain points in time. So if we pull up my screen, we'll see here an example of an intro screen. The number one thing you want to look for when you log in is in that red box there, that you're eligible to bid. If that ever says no and you believe you're supposed to be eligible to bid, you need to reach out to us and through the DART system or the email system and start a conversation about why that's not a yes, and so that we can get you fixed. Because if that stays as a no when we get to the award process, you will not be awarded anything. Next up, we want to talk about training requirements over here. So as you know, the training bid starts on the 21st of the month, 2 months prior. So since we're talking about June bid period here, the June training bid was actually March 21st through 26th. So when the bid period is created, it's created a couple days before that bid period. So it's created about the 18th or 19th, and that's when these training requirements are loaded in. Your two options are obviously early, if you're tagged for voluntary or early grace, or must go, which covers your base month and late grace. So you want to, if you're curious about training, and we're going to cover training here a little bit later, but if you're curious about training, if you log in when training opens on the 21st and you see this here, you are bidding training for the bid period that's at the top, in this case June. If the first time you see this is when line bidding opens on the 5th, you're too late. Training's already been bid for and awarded at that point. It's already on your schedule. So if the training window is different than the line window. So if you're waiting till line window and you log in and see this, you're already too late. Next up, we want to talk about something that doesn't happen frequently, but it happens enough that it's different and you need to be aware of it. So when your passport comes due, you obviously have to go on international restriction because you can't leave the country until you get the new passport. PBS needs to be flagged to prevent it from awarding you international destinations. What we have up on the screen here is you will see the restricted location groups international. That's how the software is programmed to prevent it from giving you international flying when your passport's out. If you log in and you see this and you haven't sent your passport out, you need to reach out to us. If you've sent your passport out and you log in and you don't see this, again, you need to reach out to us so that we can get this resolved. Otherwise, depending on which situation it is, if you are eligible and it says it's restricted, then you won't get internationals, which could impact your ability to get a line. Or if you are restricted and it doesn't have there, it will award it to you, and that will cause problems after the fact as far as how they have to correct it. Next, I want to talk about seniority as it relates to PBS, both from a category standpoint and from your actual seniority when it comes to bidding in your percentage of things. So the PBS is real nice that it gives you your category seniority in your base, obviously. So in this example, the pilot's 160 out of 317 in base, which puts them just past the 50% mark, which sounds pretty good. However, especially these days with the NEO issue where we're producing less lines than normal, you really need to equate this to the anticipated number of lines that are going to be in that month. So again, in this example for June, we're estimating 206 lines. You're 160, which actually puts you close to 80%, 77 and change percent as a line holder. There's a big difference there as far as what you're able to hold and the kinds of pairings you will get and the things that are associated with your line seniority here that make this difference pretty big. You may think 50% in base is good, but when you really compare it to the fact that as a line holder, you're close to 80%, that really drastically changes what you can and can't get and the kinds of flying you'll get awarded, and something you need to factor into your bidding. So every month you should be not only looking at what your category seniority is, but also comparing it to the anticipated number of lines. While we're talking about anticipated number of lines, the key word there is anticipated. This 206 is not a guarantee. It's not a hard number. It's an estimated number calculated off that month's total flying in the base divided by the estimated line value that the company is shooting for, and we come up with this number. The reality when we award out, the actual number of lines can be slightly lower, the actual number of lines can be slightly higher. It all comes down to how people bid, along with what other pre-awarded events may factor into people's ability to bid or get a line. So if you're, let's rough estimate 10% of one way or another of this line, you're in that window where it could potentially go either way, and you should be bidding appropriately knowing that. Next up, especially with changes that have been going on in the planning department lately, you want to verify the wraps that are in use for that month, especially if you're on reserve. They've been adjusting what wraps they use by base slightly from month to month. So if you've used to certain wraps in existence and you've been bidding for those, you want to verify that what you're bidding for is still in use. Prime example, Lauderdale fairly recently went from an R19 to an R20. Well, if you're running off a default where you have R19s in there, it won't change to R20. So you need to evaluate that what's going on for your base that month is still what's in play. Lastly, on the info page, this is more skewed towards the June bidding, which just opened, but it is something that you want to just keep an eye on in case we do change it again. This month we changed the maximum allowable hours in a followed by a command up to 34 to give more flexibility in followed by. And what this line does is it basically is the amount of time that is allowed from the end of the first pairing to the start of the second pairing when you're using the followed by command. So bumping it up to 34 gives you much more flexibility in your bidding strategy and gives the ability to use the followed by more with a bigger time gap between ending and starting without getting a full day off in between. If you have any questions on the followed by command, feel free to shoot us a dart and we can help you walk through it some more, but it is something to check at the bottom of the info page in case we do end up changing this again. Next up, we're going to hand it over to Miguel. He's going to talk about pre-award events and vacation.
All right, thank you, Zan. After checking the info page and figuring out where you're going to fall in regards to reserve and being a line holder and things of that nature, then the next thing you should look at is your calendar, right? And there you'll find something that's called in-period credit or a pre-award. A pre-award happens when you have a training event, usually vacation and or a trip that carries over into the following month. Why do we check that? It's important to check that because if you are trying to bid for some strategy, whether it's reserve or a line holder is going to tell you or give you an idea of how many days you need to work. By taking this amount, let's say in this particular case is 36 hours, and you know that 36 plus 36 is 72, so now you only need 36 hours to work to get you up to a reserve line of 72 hours of pay. So if you just take 36 divide that by 4, which is 4 days on reserve, then you get 9 days of reserve days. So that's kind of the math behind it. So let's break this down. The first page here, we're looking at a training event. This particular person has 1, 2, 3 days of training. Each day pays 4 hours of credit. Then we have vacation and we have inviolate days. Inviolate days are protected days that you can use here. And then vacation starts on the 16th. This person took inviolate days unpaid. That's why there's a 0 credit. And then the vacation has a 24-hour credit value. When you go to the reasons report, the calendar, the breakdown, this is kind of the same information. So we're looking in 2 places, in the calendar, and then we're looking at the results page. Last breakdown we have here is just basically the same thing you saw earlier, but in a different format. 4 hours of training, times 3, 12, plus 24 hours of vacation equals 36 hours. The next topic we want to talk about is vacation preferences. As you know, vacation, we don't bid for vacation in NABLU. That's actually done in FLICA, and it's just a preference, right? And vacation happens 2 months prior to the effective bid period. So if you have vacation in July, then your vacation selection preferences would have to be done this month from the 19th through the 24th. In FLICA, there's going to be a folder that's going to have that information for you that says additional bid preferences. If you don't see that folder, please send us a dart and we can look into it by talking to crew planning, but let us know ahead of time so we can help you preference your vacations accordingly. Our credit is between 12 and 36 per 7-day period. In the event you don't make any selections, the default would be 28 hours. So here we have an example of a pilot who's taking vacation without any preferences. He's just taking a week of vacation and then he's not making any selections. Now, when you go to FLICA, you're going to see this page here, and this is going to allow you to follow the instructions and make those selections. I'll make 2 quick important comments. One is when you click additional bid options, this will open up, and then the last thing is when you submit my request, you're not going to see a confirmation, it's simply going to say okay. Our suggestion here is that you take a screenshot of it just in case there's a discrepancy down the road when you're bidding for your regular line and in your vacation, your credit, your slide wasn't there done properly, so we can go back and help you using that screenshot to get that fixed as soon as possible. So this is what it looks like when you select additional bid options, and it's going to ask you 6 different questions in this scenario for 1 week only. So the first question is going to say week 1 vacation slide. It's going to say, do you want a slide? And then when you select that, it's going to ask you which way do you want to slide? You want to slide it -3 or +3? So if we look at this vacation slide here, if you wanted to go forward, think about if you want to do +3, you're actually going forward into a future date. In this particular case, it would be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. If you wanted to go backwards, it'll be the same thing. So if you want to do -3, it'll be Saturday, Sunday, and Thursday. So once again, to recap, +3 or +2 means forward, minus means backwards, so earlier into the week. So now we're in the selection. The next thing it's going to ask us is how much credit do we want to use? This one says 20. It says week 1, do you want to take inviolate days? You are entitled to 2 inviolate days per week. You can use those in the front of your week, at the end of your week, or one on each day. They can be paid or unpaid for line holders. They must be paid for reserve holders. So it says, I want to take 2 inviolate days. That's the next question. Where do I want them? I want them in the front, and then I want those paid. Done. Hit OK, submit, and then that's it. You're done. So now let's take a look at an example of a vacation, right? So it's a standard week, and then this particular pilot decided they want to slide their vacation 3 days, -3. Made the selection. It's going to look like so. In the next example, this pilot is doing the opposite. He's going +3, so he's going forward. Vacation starting on Wednesday. If you want to take the inviolate days paid, they will look like this. In this particular case, this pilot did a -3 slide plus 2 inviolate days paid. Once again, reemphasize, if you're a reserve, you must take them paid. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, I'd like to take a minute and talk about training. Training is something we don't do often, right? Typically once a year. So when it comes to NAVBLUE, it's a little harder to remember the nuances of the training bid. So I just want to go over that real quick. So if we go to my computer here, first thing is the training timeline is very similar to the vacation timeline, meaning that it's 2 months prior to the month it takes effect. The bid opens on the 21st and closes on the 26th with an award a couple days after that. The next question is, how do I know when I'm due for training? Well, there's 2 ways to do it. The official notification method per our contract is via the bid packet. So we recommend no matter when your base month is, grab the bid packet every month. You'll go into content, go down to 75, the crew resources bid packages, and then you would click on the month that's effective. Once you're in your base for that month, just simply do a search for your employee number and see if you're listed as needed for training. If you are, then on the 21st of the month, you should jump into NAVBLUE and work on your training bid. Now, if you're not sure when your base month is, there's another document, crew training created. It's under the training and standard pilots folder. And then down at the bottom, you'll see the training and standard pilots general. And once you're in there, it's got it broken down between captains and first officers. And this is the training event due month. So this is every captain's due month. You can go in there, figure out what the due month is, and then know when you should start expecting training. Same for first officers, but again, we recommend with the company sometime rebasing pilots that you go in every month and see if you've been notified in the bid packet of needing training. The next part, as Zan kind of talked about a little bit, we have an early option and a must-go option in NAVBLUE. Early is when you're grace early from your due month. If you're a must-go pilot, then you must go, and that's via your due month or your late grace month. Either of those are both considered must-goes. So if you're early, you have an avoid voluntary training option. In fact, this line is going to be there in every training bid you submit. There's no way to get rid of it. The only thing you can do if you want to go early is move it down. You can't delete the line, but you could move it to the bottom of the bid if you want to go early. But I also want to mention if you're a must go, so in your due month or your late grace, the avoid voluntary training will be ignored. So if you have it at the top, it's not going to do anything. It's totally ignored. If you do wind up getting training with it at the top, your results page would say honored. And it says honored because the training you have to do is not voluntary anymore. So it didn't give you voluntary training, it only gave you mandatory training. And then from there, you can list days off you would like, or list the pairings you would like to do for training. Me personally, when I go do my bid month for training, I go through the training tab and I look at every pairing and I just list the pairing numbers in the order I want them. Because with AQP now, all the pairings typically start at 8 a.m. because that's when the ground school starts. And then the sim times are within the pairing. So there's no command to say I want sim times that start after a certain time. So I just go in, I list every pairing I want in the order I want it. And if I have any avoids or prefer offs, I'll put that on top. Another thing we see a lot of pilots do here is they waive minimum days off to 1. The only reason you'd need to do that is if you want training in the first part of the month, meaning the first 4 days of the month, and you had some flying the previous month that would carry out. So if you're trying to avoid training or you want training towards the end of the month or anything like that, there's no need to have this waive minimum days off in your training bid. The logic of PBS and the goal of PBS is to fill all available training slots. So it'll do its best to honor seniority, but you've got to remember the vacation bidding closes before training bidding does. So pilots might have vacation and they may be junior, so they can't take a junior slot that's left because it covers a vacation and vacation takes priority. So the main goal of PBS, it'll do its best to honor seniority, but overall it's going to fill all available training slots. If crew training has created enough training slots where all the must-goes get training, then it'll start assigning the earlies and give them training as well. It's not going to stop just because you have a void voluntary. If all the early pilots have a void voluntary at the top of their bid, well, somebody's going to have to go because Nav Blue's mission is to fill all the slots that crew training has created. Hopefully that makes a little more sense. We're going to go on to live questions now. Again, the email was up earlier or in the text number. But we're going to go to Zan for the first question.
All right, so first off, we do have quite a bit of questions that have come in ahead of time. That's what we're going to start working with. As we get near the end of this, there have been questions coming in all day today since we put out the last blast. So we'll cover those as near the end as they keep coming in. But to start with, we've got Peter from O'Hare, who I'm trying to figure out how to improve my reserve bidding. Nowadays, I get a coverage award every single weekend. I thought it was because I was waiving down to 1 day off, but looking at my last reasons report, it seems like the PBS used my last bid, which has no waiving, and just asked for Saturdays and Sundays off. Please help. All right, so reserve unstacking has become much more of a thing lately. The company is focusing much more on weekend performance, not only because that is where a good chunk of our flying is, but also because they want sufficient people in place for if something goes wrong over the weekends where we have all that extra flying. The old way before we started getting into more and more unstacking, the old way we used to teach this was that bid for what you wanted and then slowly work your way down where you're waiving more and more days off to give yourself more freedom to get those days. And we pull up my screen, we'll see an example of that with regards to what we used to teach. Now, this is all well and good up until lately. If you end up in this bottom group because you're getting unstacked, say the 8th and 9th, so the software's determined you need to work the 8th and 9th, it has moved through the previous groups, do the outstart next on the 8th and 9th, until you get down to this last one. And no matter what you say or do, because you've been determined that you have to work the 8th or 9th for staffing, it's going to make you work those. Coming down to this last bid group, you've waived to 1, you are now going to still lose out on getting the 8th and 9th off, and now you're still stuck at 1. So what we're recommending these days is continue with this process, But ask yourself and build yourself out of, what do I want happen? What do I want to happen when no matter what I do as a bid, I have to work the days I want off because of coverage. And so if I go to the next thing here, I've cut the top couple ones off because we don't need to repeat the concept. But here's the discussion of what to do once you get past that wave to 1. Come back out of wave to 1. Whether you come back out to 2, 3, or 4 is up to you. But come back out so that you're not stuck down there at the 1. While waiving your days off, both as a line holder and reserve, gives the software easier ability to give you what you want. At the same time, especially when we're talking about reserve and the rules that reserve has in place as far as minimum number of days that you can work and maximum number of days, waiving days off actually makes it also easier for you to get unstacking. Since we're talking about weekends, every weekend, if you're working a 6-day group, you really can't work 2 weekends if you're doing the 6 on 4 off pattern due to the nature of math in a month. If you waive your days off down to 3 and 2 and 1, that gives the software the ability to not only give you less days between the chunks, but shrink those chunks from the 6 down to 5 or 4, which gives it more flexibility to unstack you on multiple weekends in a row. You can't avoid unstacking. Once the software is determined that pilot X has to work whatever days that it's determined it needs to work, let's keep with the 8th and 9th argument, pilot X and everyone below pilot X has a trigger on them that says you will work the 8th and 9th. The key is that the software cannot violate legality to make you work the 8th and 9th. So whether that be FAR legality or contractual legality with regards to days off, it cannot break those in order to make you work. So while Pilot X and everyone below are triggered as having to work the 8th and 9th, if you as Pilot X notice pilots below you having the 8th and 9th off, that's not because they weren't unstacked those days. It's because for reasons of either FARs or how they waived contractually, they are not legal to take that assignment. And that's a big key point here, and one of the reasons that we're now advocating that once you get down to that wave to 1, if you still can't have what you want, back yourself back out to something that is more realistic or more helpful to you by giving you more days in a row than the potential of getting stuck with a 6 on, 1 off, 6 on category in order to hit the coverage requirements. Next up, I'm going to pass it over to Justin for our next question.
All right, looks like we've got David from Orlando sent in, how can I avoid trips with 3 legs or more per day? Well, that one's actually pretty easy. If we pull up my screen, I've got it here on bid line number 2. Avoid pairings if any duty legs, and I did counting deadhead legs, is greater than 2. So what that'll tell PBS is remove any pairings from the pairing pool that have more than 2 legs on any given day. And you can decide whether you want to count deadhead legs in that or not, but that's the simple part of how you would do it. Our next question comes from Chris in Atlanta. He said, last month I asked for a specific pairing and was awarded it several times that month, but I only wanted a couple of them. Is there a way to tell PBS I only want the trip a couple of times? Thankfully, yes, there is. None of us want to go to the same place every time we come to work, so thankfully NavBlue built that in for us. If we pull my screen up again, I've got award pairing if pairing number Lima 4003 and limit 2. Now this limit does kind of hide here, so I'll go edit it, show you where it was. We go under award pairing. You put in the pairing number you want here, and then if you keep scrolling down to the bottom, we have limit and followed by. These are the 2 commands that aren't in alphabetical order above. So once you come down to limit, you just click on that, select whatever you want that limit to be. So that's another fairly simple answer. Looks like this next one kind of ties in. Lee from Orlando, how can I bid for specific pairings if it departs on multiple days? So he's saying there's one pairing number, it departs it repeats a bunch throughout the month, and I only want it on specific days. So the way to do that, I've got up here on my bid as well. It's award pairing if pairing number 4003 and departing on. I just picked a couple dates that it departs as an example here. But to show you how to get there again, if I go into edit, it's award pairings. And instead of just clicking pairing number above, do the one that says pairing number departing on. Then once you're in there, you come here to select your pairing number. And then you select the dates that you want it to do. So I'll just grab 4003 again since it's right here. You see it operates on all these days that turn blue. So you just select whichever of those days you actually want to work the pairing. Click apply at the end and it will show up just like that. Looks like Miguel's going to take our next question.
Thank you, Justin. The next question comes from Andrew in ORD. What is forget and redo and why would I use it? So I have a bid here with this pilot asking for weekends off, avoiding duty at 3 a.m., avoid pairings of landings in LaGuardia, and then he's asking for 1, 2, 3, and 4-day pairings. So forget and redo, that's an instruction. So let's talk about how we got there, and then let's talk about the process. So to add a forget line, we simply go into instruction, select that, and then we select forget, we hit apply, and then line 5, right? We want to select the line that we want to avoid, and in this case, LaGuardia, and we select that, and that's how we got there. So that's the first line. So we're saying if you get to the end of the process, right, as you remember, PBS processes from top to bottom, left to right. So if you get to line number 9 and you have not been able to build me a line with all this avoid and preferred conditions and the awards at the same time, then I am willing to take that and specifically target that LaGuardia, take it out in order for you to build me a line. Then we can do the function of redo from line 6. So essentially we're saying we want to forget line 5, which is right here, and then we want you to start in line 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever your preference is. I decided to do line 6. So it's important to emphasize that a forget and redo function, it's not to forget every single avoid condition, because that kind of defeats the purpose of doing that. The way to think about it is if you get to about 80% there and you want to get that line, then you don't want to do 5 landings on LaGuardia, but maybe only 1, right? And so that would be one way to think about it. So one way to use this forget and redo is just to allow an avoid condition to be taken out if it needed to. And that answers my question.
All right, I got the next one. It's Robert from Vegas. I'm a new reserve captain in Vegas and have struggled with getting days off on reserve in the wrap I want, despite being in the top 20% of reserve bidders based on seniority. After the bids close, I see someone junior me who has the wrap I wanted and the days off I requested, and it's a bit frustrating. All right, so there's 2 components to this, and I'm going to start with the days component. Going back to kind of what we said a little bit previously about bidding, days off is going to come down to how you and the other pilot finish the previous month, along with how you and the other pilot waive or don't waive your days off. So without specifics of looking at your bid and their bid and figuring out who got what or how, but it does come down to, depending on how you both finished the previous month and how you waive, with the fact that you have to work 4 on and you can't work more than 6 on, that kind of sets up the pattern of why you may not have gotten the days you wanted while they may have gotten the days, or vice versa. The other part of this question is about wraps, and this is probably still one of the biggest things that we deal with on a monthly basis, and unfortunately is probably the biggest downfall of the current version of how the software is programmed. We talked about this in the last town hall about how the wrap functionality of the software is an add-on part to the software. The core part of the software was not written with wraps in mind. It was written long before wraps existed. So it doesn't have that functionality. The core algorithm is designed to just give a reserve day. And we've put out some stuff and talked about how it's a two-step process. And that step one is what the core part of the software is designed to do. I've got an example up here of what the software actually outputs at step one. So you'll see that the software goes through and awards everyone their work schedule. Their entire schedule for the entire base, it's built in step one. All it's doing is giving a day of work, and you'll see that it goes from midnight to midnight, and everything just says reserve on here. This is what the core functionality of the software is designed for, and this is step one. This is what you have control over in bidding as far as days off and things like that. This is seniority driven. You can control somewhat, if we discount the discussion of unstacking at the moment, but you can control when you go to work. Step two happens after the whole bid, or the whole base has their schedule. So step one goes through and awards everyone their schedule, and step two then comes back and changes all of these reserve days into wraps. And I'm gonna jump screens here in a second and just watch that the days don't change, just the wraps change. So as you see here, all the software did was convert the reserve day that you were assigned into a wrap. And this wrap assignment is where it moves off the seniority, strictly seniority discussion and more into a global solution. And the reason is that the software add-on is designed to have you do a wrap based on the days that you're working and what the need for the wraps are on those specific days. So based on, assuming you have a clean schedule like line 3 here, where they're working all 18 of the reserve days, the software looks at those days and determines which wrap you can cover the best. So that's where it's not quite, so it's not running in seniority in that, oh, the first 5 people who asked for R16 get R16. No, it's based on the days that you're working and what we've already assigned out to the people above you, you're getting assigned a wrap that covers the days that you're working the best. So this is why we say that you can't really bid for wraps. Unlike the way that you bid for days off, you can't bid specifically for wraps. You can't just put a bid in and say, give me R3, because as you saw, the first step is it just gives you work days. It doesn't even look at this. So there's no way for you to say, just give me R3 or change my bid, because when it gets to stage 2, your schedule is set. It doesn't change anything at that point. That's why in our training materials, we say all you're doing is preferencing your wraps. And the reason is that while you can't bid for them, you can preference them so that, especially in these bases that have multiple wraps, if on the days that you're working, there's equal weight needed for, say we need as many, you can cover as many R3s as you can cover R10s on the days you're working. That's where your preference comes into play. So if you've bid for R10 over, or if you've preferenced R10 over R3 in your bid, because it needs as many R10s as it needs R3s, it will give you that R10. If you don't preference anything, or if you've just preferenced one thing, as we see frequently, people think that if they just put one thing in, it will give them that and move on, and that's not the case. If you only put in one thing, or don't cover all the wraps in your base in the preference order you want them, then the software gets pretty much carte blanche and gets to give you whatever it wants. So hopefully that helps explain wraps a little better than we did last time, because we didn't have the graphic up explaining step 1 and step 2. Our next question is from Brian in Dallas. I'm familiar with FAR 117, but I've been denied trips even though I had 10 hours of rest in base. Is there a buffer I'm not aware of? The short answer is yes. And if you dig into the PBS MOU, there are actually there's 6 buffers in play. And I've got a copy of the screenshot from the PBS MOU that we can jump to here, which covers all the buffers. The primary one that you're going to encounter is that 10-hour rest one. It is buffered by an hour. So you have to have 11 hours of rest between pairings. But as you read through, you can see there's a couple other buffers, primarily dealing with flight time, duty time, as far as the duty lengths and block times. They are buffered also to keep you from exceeding them. But the big buffer that you will probably run up against on a somewhat regular basis is the fact that it's not 10 hours of rest that you have to have, it's 11. Justin's got our next set of questions.
All right, this question comes from Nick in Fort Lauderdale. He says, I have 2 vacation weeks for July. Can I split my 14 days? I would like to have the most days off, and I don't know how to bid for a line with vacation included. Any tips are appreciated. Well, Nick, the first part of your question talks about a 14-day vacation. As far as splitting that, it really depends on how it was awarded. If it was awarded in the same round back in October when we did vacation bidding, if it was awarded in the same round as a 2-week block, then you cannot split that apart. However, if you were awarded 1 week in one round and 1 week in a different round, then yes, you could, in theory, move one forward and one backwards if you wanted to, giving you about 6 days off in between. So that part of it just depends on how it was awarded and what rounds you were awarded that vacation. Your next part of it said you'd like to have the most days off possible. As Miguel kind of talked about, when you go to do your vacation preference, you can select how much credit you want for each vacation week. And so the more credit you use, the less PBS is going to have to build the rest of the month, meaning the more days off you'll get. However, if you use towards the lower limit of that, let's say you use 12 hours each week as an example, that's 24 hours pre-awarded credit, and you need to get to roughly 74 or so on an average month. So that's about 50 hours it has to give you, and it only has 2 weeks to do that. So not only does that make it harder to be a line holder that month, it also means if you are still able to hold a line that month, that you're going to be working really hard the other 2 weeks, and then you'll get your 2-week vacation. The inverse of that is true as well. If you use a higher number of credit, let's just say you use 36, which is the max for each week, that would be 72 hours, and you're pretty much done at that point. If you bid reserve, you would be totally done and not get any flying. However, if you built a line, it really depends on if you'd get a trip or two based on the thresholds that are set, as Zan talked about earlier. So if you want more days off, you have to use more vacation credit for that. Another point I want to point out here is vacation is considered days off. So if you want more time off around your vacation, you're going to need to bid for that, because the 4-day off doesn't really apply since vacation is all days off. It can have you work right up till the end of your vacation or start the day right after your vacation. So if you kind of want days off around the vacation, you need to bid for that either on one side or both. With that, Miguel, you want to get the next one?
Sure. Thanks, Justin. Can you show an example of how to bid for a large chunk of consecutive days off? Okay. This question comes from Juan in Fort Lauderdale. Good question. I like this question. Sometimes I bid this way. So the idea behind a large chunk of days, let's say in this example 10, didn't say how many, so I'm going to say 10, but the logic applies to 8 or 9 or 11, depending on being a line holder or being on reserve. So basically, we go to do a set condition, 10 consecutive days off in a row, and I did a date range between the 1st and the 14th. So how do we get there? Set condition, towards the bottom, consecutive days off in a row, and I selected 10. If you want to do 11, you can do 11. Down here, there's a box, so you click on it for a date range, and I use the example for the first 2 weeks. So what this is saying is it's telling PBS that if you're able to honor 10 days somewhere in between the 1st and the 14th, and you could do it from the 1st through the 22nd. The logic still the same, but I use the 14th just for easy math. So that's one way to do it. If you don't have specific dates, if you just need 10 days off, you would simply select 10 days off in a row or however many you need, and it would be the same thing. Set condition, at the bottom, consecutive days off in a row, and then make your selection and apply. Once again, if you need the dates, you select it. If you don't select the dates. I think it's worth mentioning because I don't know if you're on reserve or not, so I built this for a pairing line holder, but just in case you ever wanted to bid reserve, it would look something like this. You put all your wraps in order of preference, wave down to 1 day, and then typically on reserve, the most amount of days you can get in a row is 10. So that's why I chose the number 10 here. And so that's how you would do it if you are trying to bid reserve at some point, or anyone else for that matter. So that's it for me.
All right, the next question is actually is two questions that we can cover with the same answer. Miguel in Lauderdale and Mark in Lauderdale, so they're both Lauderdale questions. The first part is, I bid min credits, but I was awarded 75 hours. Why? And conversely, or sort of paired with that, if I bid max credit and then bid specific trips in the following lines, will I be awarded something more than 72 hours? So both of these revolve around the credit window discussion. There are 3 separate credit windows in the software that we use. There's the normal credit window, the minimum credit window, and the maximum credit window. And all 3 of these are defined as far as what they can and can't be within the PBS MOU off of the published normal threshold window. For all 3 of them, you have to get to the bottom of the window to be a line holder. And the difference there, and I've got on my screen an example that we can use that you can follow along with me. So the top is the minimum credit window, the middle is the normal, and the bottom is obviously the maximum credit window. You'll notice that the maximum, appropriately so, the requirements to be in that window is higher than the other 2. But all 3 of them require you to hit that bottom number to be a line holder. All 3 of them, once you hit that bottom number, will no longer enter denial mode to continue to award you stuff. All 3 of them cannot award above the top end. So the maximum window, you cannot go above that. Now, the key here, and the part that sort of answers both of these questions, all 3 of them have a threshold value. The threshold value is one of the very few things that we can control in the run process to come up with a valid and legal solution. By manipulating and moving the threshold value, you can adjust the bid results to meet the required ALV for that run. The software is designed that once you're in the credit window, it will still keep awarding trips until it hits the threshold, as long as there's additional pairings for it to award. So whether you have more award pairings or whether it can find more pairings off the award line that is working, it will keep working until it hits or exceeds this threshold value, and that's when it stops. If it doesn't have anything else to add, then you come up short and you stop before it, because the software will no longer enter denial mode just to get you to the threshold. But as long as there's additional stuff to award, the software is designed to always aim for that threshold value. And like I said, this is one of the few things that we can control. Depending on how many min credit bidders we have or max credit bidders we have, that's why we would adjust these. In the example of why I bid min credit and got 75, more than likely the threshold was set above whatever the min credit requirement for the line was for that person. Same conversation for the guy who's bidding max credit. Once you get to the 75, in this example of what we published last month, this is Chicago for last month, it would keep working to try and get you above that 77. But that's how the credit windows work and the threshold value within. We can't really publish the threshold value ahead of time because, like I said, that's the one thing that we actively manipulate through the award process to get legal runs. So our next question, Miguel's going to handle for us.
Thank you. Next question is, when asking for days off, what's the difference between all or nothing and ESN? This question is from Alex in Houston. Well, so all or nothing basically says honor that entire line or process the next line. Start next bid group. If you can't honor that line, process the next bid group. So the biggest difference is all or nothing stays within the same bid group, and ESN actually processes the next bid group. So here I have built a prefer off condition from the 1st of June through the 9th with all or nothing. So how do we get there? Prefer off. We select the range between the 1st and the 9th. Then we go back. And at the bottom, there's a box that you click, all or nothing, and you hit apply. And I basically built 3 different lines, 1, 2, and 3. The concept here is that you want all of those days to get honored or process the next bid line. Now, if it's not able to honor line number 3 due to seniority or whatever the situation is, it's going to say unable, it's going to process line 4. If I can't honor that, then it's going to process line 5. Where here, when it gets to line number 6, if it's unable to honor that line, then it's going to move to the next bid group if you have one below that. So that's the biggest difference. The idea behind all or nothing is that if you want a range of days, let's say in this scenario from the 1st through the 9th, you don't want to get a random day assigned in the middle, right? You want as many days as you can, as close as possible to that date. In this scenario, 1st through the 9th, can't do that, then I'll do the 1st through the 8th, or 1st through the 7th. Last attempt is 1st through the 6th, otherwise process the next bid group. And that's how you would do that, and now it's the biggest difference between all or nothing and ESN.
I just want to add one thing there, Miguel.
Yeah.
We see a lot of pilots will do all or nothing and L start next in the same bid line. That's really redundant. All or nothing is a everything must be honored line, as well as L start next bid group. So it doesn't really hurt. However, you're saying give me everything or move on, and give me everything or move on. So it's just really redundant. One of them works, like he said, just to process the next line. The L start next works, process the next bid group. Yeah. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you, Justin. And on the same line, if you use them both at the same time, all or nothing and ESN, ESN is going to take priority, so it's going to process the next bid group. So just be careful with that. Good addition there. Thanks.
Cool. You want to grab this next one from Ashley?
Sure. This one is from Ashley in MCO. Would I have better luck getting a range of days by bidding dates, range versus dates list? Well, the answer is it's the same, right? It doesn't really matter. We're accomplishing the same thing. The idea behind asking for dates, just like I have here, is just basically if you need prefer off, here you select the dates individually. So if you wanted weekends off, you could do that there. Or if you wanted a range, let's say from the 1st through the 22nd, PBS allows you to put all of that all in one click without clicking in each individual date. So if you need a range of days, either you prefer them, what matters is the order that you put them in, whether you put them in line 14, 1st through the 10th under one line, or you do a range, it doesn't matter. It's going to process the same, and it's going to start from left to right. That's it.
All right, I got the next question. It's Jesse from Orlando. Last month I was unstacked a trip on a day I bid off. How do I prevent this in the future? Unfortunately, the answer is there's not a lot you can do to prevent unstacking. We talked about unstacking with the reserve earlier. About the only way you can prevent unstacking is not being legal to work that day. There's no trick, there's no bid option, there's nothing that you can put into your bid or some secret command that when the software determines you have to work the 8th, as long as you are legal to work the 8th, you're going to work the 8th. So the only way that you could bid to not be unstacked, and to be clear, you're still being unstacked the 8th, you're just not legal to take the assignment, is to basically bid in a way that makes you illegal to work that day, which is a little hard to do from a line standpoint because of the flexibility there. It's a little easier to manipulate yourself on reserve to be illegal through your days off kind of setup than it is as a line holder. But there's not a way to not be unstacked other than in increasing base seniority. So Justin's got our next one.
All right, Carlos sent this in via text, it looks like. Good morning. I was awarded vacation for June 16th through June 22nd. I like to work 6 on, 4 off. How does this week vacation time affect the 6 on, 4 off schedule? So, Carlos, I'm assuming you're on reserve since you're talking about the 6 and 4 status there. But really, the 6 on, 4 off, that only happens in a normal month without vacation, because if you're not waiving your minimum days off to 4, the only way to fit 18 working days in a month while honoring 4 days off in between each work block is work blocks of 6. Once you throw vacation in there, that's a variable that kind of changes everything. Part of that would depend on how much credit you use for your vacation. As I mentioned previously, if you use more credit, that's less work days. If you use less credit, that's more work days. So if we just take a 28-hour vacation, which is the default, 7 days of the week, that vacation week would be worth 28 hours. So if we take 72 hours, which is required for reserve, and you subtract the 28 hours of vacation, that would give us 44 hours. So if we take that 44 and divide it by 4, that would tell you you're going to have to work 11 work days outside of your vacation. So if that was the scenario, it would at best be a solution of 6 on, 4 off, and then 5 on, or some variation of it. But because it introduces a variable and it's not a strict requirement anymore, it could happen several ways. The lowest work block you get is 4. But I think if you just don't waive your minimum days off to 4 in that, you'll still get blocks together, and it can never be less than 4 unless it touches the first part of the month. So there's really not a great way to control that if that's what you're looking for, other than try to go ahead and bid your days off around your vacation that you may want. And as I said earlier, keep in mind your vacation is considered days off. So if you don't bid for it, your reserve can go right up to your vacation and start directly after your vacation. Zan, you want to take the next?
Sure. Next up is Dustin from Vegas. What are some of the best ways to improve your chances of getting a long call? Can you be awarded long call if you're only bidding 4 days of reserve in a row, or do you need to bid 5 and 6 days of reserve for PBS to award long call? Well, to start, no, yes, you can be awarded long call with 4 days of reserve. No, you don't have to bid 5 and 6. Long call is 100% seniority. If on the info page, every base tells you how many long call lines there are. I believe Vegas is 10, correct? All right, so there's 10 long call lines. The first 10 pilots, regardless of their bid, what they're asking for, days off, any of that, the first 10 pilots to bid for long call get long call. Has nothing to do with what days off you want, has nothing to do whether you're bidding for 4 days, 5 days, 6 days. It's 100% the first 10 pilots to ask for it get it. So the only way that you can improve your chances is to convince the 10 guys above you not to bid it. But yeah, so there's not a PBS trick. Again, it's 100%. If there's 10, the first 10 guys to bid it get it. Justin?
Okay. Looks like Joe from Dallas says, why do we have a limit on bid lines? I like to do a massive cascading bid with days off being slowly reduced while reducing and waiving days off, and I run out of space. My standard bid is rather large with limits on start, finish times, and overnight links. Well, Joe, 2 things. Those of you that may not know what we're talking about, if you're going in and building a bid in PBS, you can only have 200 bid lines. That's the limit we put in. It's a recommendation that came from NavBlue, and the reason for that is some of our bases already take anywhere from 1 hour is kind of more standard, but we see runs take 9, 10 hours, and we've even seen some go into the teens before. Part of that depends on how hard we're pushing the system to get a valid solution. And Zan mentioned this earlier, there are parameters in the PBS MOU that make a run solution legal. Some of that's ALV, unstacking is another one. There's limits for line holder unstacking. There's no limit on reserve unstacking. And there's several other things in the PBS MOU that we're bound to produce results that go within that. So what that means is we put parameters in the software. We tell it to go figure it out. It comes back anywhere between 9 and we'll just call it 10 hours later. And then we have to evaluate what it spit out and say, is this a legal run? If it's not, we have to go adjust parameters, do it again, wait another several hours, back and forth. So if pilots are using more than 200 lines, that's going to take even longer to run those results. So that's the reason why. Now, to help you out with that, you said you do cascading bids with days off being slowly reduced. That's something you can do manually. You could do a forget and redo, but it's something that denial mode will do automatically. We see a lot of pilots kind of do their own denial mode, and what it does is it just eats up bid lines, and it does exactly what denial mode would be. So without looking at your bid, there may be ways we can cut your bid down and be just as effective and give you what you want. Another tip would be use the pairing analyzer on your bids. As I said, bids change every month, pairings change every month. So if you use the bid analyzer, if you don't know what that is, we do have a video of it on our YouTube page just called Pairing Analyzer. If you highlight a line on one of your award pairings, it'll say, okay, there's 4 of those that match, and it's going to award however many. But we see a lot of pilots that have these long bid groups where they have lines that there's no pairings that match that line at all. So that's another way you could trim down your bid and still get the same results. Another thing we see pilots do is they'll be avoiding something. Let's say avoid turn times more than 3 hours, and then they'll do 2 hours and 45 minutes, and then 2 hours and 30 minutes. And it's just really small gaps. And if you use the pairing analyzer again, you may see that whatever step downs you're doing are only adding 1 or 2 pairings. Whereas if you increase that by an hour, 30 minutes, or whatever the case will be, you're only going to add 6 pairings instead of just adding 2. So it's still a very small chunk to give you exactly what you want. But bottom line, you just need to bring your requirements down, check what you're asking for is actually anything available in NavBlue. If you have further questions on that, send us another dart. We could go over it with you, but highly recommend watching the Pairing Analyzer video we have on our YouTube channel. I think that'll answer most of your questions, but if you watch that, have more questions, feel free to send another dart. We'll help you out there. Miguel, you want to help out Jeff?
Yes. Jeff in Orlando, is it possible to award 4-day trips from highest credit to the lowest credit? So what I did here, I went to the pairings tab and I basically looked at the menu and I asked myself, okay, what is the highest credit pairing that we have here in Orlando? So I select the hourglass and I select the parameters and I look for pairing total credit and I go greater than, and I'm gonna choose 26, and I see that there's only 1 pairing. Okay, then I'll do 25, and that's how you can get an idea what the highest pairing is. So obviously using anything above 27 would be pointless for your situation. But the system is designed, if you look at bid number 1 here, it's designed to give you trips, to award trips from highest credit to lowest. So if you simply do award pairings, if pairing length equals 4 days, then it'll try to attempt to give you that many days. Because we always emphasize here to have a plan A, plan B, and C, and I don't like surprises, and I have no idea where you are in seniority. I would do something like avoid pairings if average daily credit is less than 445. The idea behind that is that if we have a few of those, by the time you get to your seniority, a few of those 17-hour 4 days, it'll try to avoid those as much as possible. Another way to do it is to build something similar to this, right? And cascading from 26 to 25, 24, etc., all the way down till you get to 1959. Or you go to the pairings pool and you select the pairings that you want by using the hourglass and the parameters, and then you actually add them to your bid. So that's another way to do it. But there's a lot of ways to accomplish this.
So we're down to our last couple. These have actually come in while we've been on the air. So we've been trying to throw some stuff together just to answer them when we're been off camera. Matt from Lauderdale is asking, can you explain Start Next and when to use it? We did talk a little bit about this with Miguel, Start Next and All or Nothing, but I do want to touch a little bit more as to what it is and why you use it. So I threw something real quick together up here on my screen if you want to. So the software cannot just move from one bid group to the next. So up here in group 1, I'm just asking for June 4th off. If I can't have June 4th off, it's not going to automatically move, it's just going to deny it. So if you have something that you need or want, and you want to try a different bid strategy, if you can't have it, that's what Start Next does. What you're telling the software is that when it gets to this line, and I'm going to come down to the next bid group because that's actually where the Start Next is. What we're saying is that when the software goes to deny this request, deny the 4th, instead of denying the request, I want you to start in the next bid group. So don't deny it, start in the next bid group. And that's where it allows you to move from one bid group to the next and change something that frees up your restrictions. Obviously, in this case, I just went from my 4 days off to 3 days off. But that's the purpose behind Start Next. This is something that I need bad enough that I want to change my bid strategy, and in order to do that, I need a different bid group. And so instead of denying my request, move to the next bid group. Justin, I believe you have the last one for the day.
Yeah, I'll just say if there's any more questions on what Zan and Miguel said there, if we still didn't answer it, send us a dart. We'd like to get you an answer if that didn't cover it. Looks like our last question is from Omer in Fort Lauderdale. Is there a way to view older bids? This is actually a question we get several times a year. It's not super common, but it's not an uncommon question either. The answer is yes, there is. So I just logged into my bid here. I typically bid in my default tab. I don't bid in my current tab because I don't change much from month to month. But you'll see here in the drop-down menu, I'm selected in June. If I want to go back and see what I did for May and even copy it and put it in this bid group, I can. So if I go back to May, that changed. Let's just say I want to copy my bid group. I can copy it. I can go back to June. And I'll just put this in my current tab for June. I can paste here. And that's what I did last month. It's got the April dates in there. I could change those dates and then just go ahead with the bid. If you want to go back further than 1 month, if this little arrow circle here is the syncing data. I won't do it on screen the full way because it does take time, as you see when you log in. But once this comes up, you can go select these other dates that you might want to pull your bid from, grab those and do the same copy paste function. I'm just not going to do that here because the synchronizing takes too long. Again, this is something we do have a video on our YouTube page. And as that's the last question, I want to thank everyone for coming. Thanks to my team for helping out, the guys in the booth, all our volunteers and PBS experts that answer the darts month in and month out on their own time. We really appreciate your help with that. Pilots, we appreciate your participation. Trying to learn how to bid better or understand the system better should have a good impact on your quality of life. As I mentioned a few times, our YouTube channel, we have a lot of videos there. Some of them are specific topic related. We had our last town hall is loaded there, and give it a couple days and this town hall will be loaded there. So for anyone that might be flying and ask you about it, you can tell them just give it a couple days, go look there. Also under spa.alpa.org, once you sign in, scroll down to the PBS page. You see it there, the center tile. That's the quickest way to get to it. That's on the home page. Just got to scroll down a little bit to see those tiles. Click there. Once you're there, we've got links to the videos, we've got documents we put together, a PBS QRM that's broken down by topics, as well as just other information we put out there. So we try to give you guys lots of resources. You see the emails we send out. The status page often has PBS stuff in it. So we appreciate your participation. We appreciate you trying to learn the most you can. And again, thanks for my team, whole team here. And we're signing out. We'll see you guys on the line.